Welcome, everybody. Welcome to How to Protect Water Quality as Communities Grow. I am Christian Wagley. I work for the nonprofit organization called Healthy Gulf, which is based in New Orleans. We are a regional nonprofit organization that works from Florida to Texas. We work in all five Gulf states. And I actually live in Pensacola, Florida, and work mostly in Northwest Florida and as well as South Alabama. Just a little bit about how we're going to do things tonight. I'll get a full introduction of our presenter here, Paul Owens, in just a moment. But we do want to get questions from everybody, so feel free to put those in the chat at any time during Paul's presentation this evening, and we'll be sure to get those to Paul at the end. And we'll keep this to under an hour for sure, in respect of everybody's time. But Paul's got some great information to share, and we're glad you all are here. And I'm gonna, whoops. Just trying to multitask here and admit a few other folks into the call. But I'm going to go ahead and give Paul a full introduction. And by the way, I've had the great joy of working with Paul as somebody with a fellow nonprofit organization, and I've been a member of his organization, 1,000 Friends, for a long time. So it's really an honor to have Paul with us here this evening. So a little bit more about Paul. Paul is the president of 1,000 Friends of Florida. It's a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to planning for sustainable communities amid the state of Florida's rapid growth. Prior to joining 1,000 Friends back in 2018, Paul was an editorial writer and ultimately the opinions editor for the Orlando Sentinel. In that position, he wrote extensively on the environment, the economy, growth, and development in Florida. Earlier in his career, Paul worked for the Associated Press, the U.S. Senate, and also the U.S. Department of Energy. He earned his graduate degree in journalism from Stanford University and his undergraduate degree in history from Swarthmore College. And so with that, Paul, we are so happy to have you here this evening presenting the results of this work that you and your organization recently did that actually was centered on Escambia and Santa Rosa County, so the area where I live. So with that, take it away, Paul.
Okay, thank you, Christian. Thank you for the nice introduction. And right back at you about working with you and Healthy Gulf. That's a great organization. And you've been a leader in your part of the state for are the same kind of things that we're interested in, sustainable development and healthier communities. So we were glad to hear about this opportunity from you and work with you on this. Um, so I'm going to share my screen with my PowerPoint and hopefully, and Christian, you let me know if we have the right one that's showing at the moment.
Looking good, Paul.
Okay, great. So Christian told you a little bit about 1,000 Friends of Florida. We are nonprofit, we are nonpartisan. We're a 501(c)(3), which means we don't get involved in electioneering. Um, but we are advocates, as Christian said, for environmentally and fiscally sustainable development. And it's actually possible to accomplish both of those goals if you plan properly. And we will work with anyone who shares those goals. Obviously, conservation groups, but also business groups, state and local leaders, and really anyone who believes in growing at a sustainable way in Florida. For decades, we've been among the fastest growing states in the country, and it doesn't look like we're going to be slowing down much anytime soon. So, I am speaking to you from my home office, which happens to be in Orlando. And this is where my family and I moved in 2001. And this, in our fast growing state, Central Florida happens to be one of the fastest growing places of all. Um, Christian mentioned that I worked for the Orlando Sentinel. I was hired by the editorial page editor at the time, who had won a Pulitzer Prize, which is the top prize in journalism. And she won it for a series on the consequences of poorly planned growth in Central Florida. And those include consequences like environmental degradation and chronic traffic jams, and crowded schools, polluted water, and higher taxes. Because dealing with all of those consequences puts a strain on public services and leads to higher taxes. So, advocating better planning for growth remained a priority for the Sentinel while I was there, and for me personally throughout my 16 years on the editorial board. And as Christian mentioned, I became opinions editor, editorial page editor in 2013. But because of the Sentinel's interest and my personal interest in planning for growth, I became familiar with the work of 1,000 Friends of Florida and an admirer of their work. So when the president's position at 1,000 Friends of Florida opened in 2018, I moved into that role and actually took a pay cut from where I'd been at the Sentinel. And, why would I do something like that? Well, the short answer is because I love Florida and I want to preserve it for future generations, including the two children that my wife and I raised here in Central Florida. And I'm convinced that the best way to protect our state's environment, its economy, and its quality of life, and the health of our communities is to plan properly for growth. During my tenure, through statewide reports and through workshops in 11 counties so far, 1,000 Friends has demonstrated how thoughtful planning can accommodate Florida's rapid population growth while preserving environmentally valuable natural and agricultural land. And it was a little over a year ago that Christian alerted me to the opportunity to do this kind of a workshop for Escambia and Santa Rosa counties with funding from the Pensacola and Perdido Bays Estuary Program. Now, we jumped at the chance to encourage good planning for Escambia and Santa Rosa counties because both counties are rich in environmental resources, history, and a distinctive character. And those assets are at risk. Those assets are threatened if the growth that's headed here, like the rest of Florida, is not well planned for. And both of these counties face significant growth in the years ahead. People are really discovering Escambia and Santa Rosa counties, how beautiful they are, how pleasant it is to live there. So we started with the same workshop plan for Escambia and Santa Rosa County as those other counties that I had listed in the previous slide, but we added to an element for the first time to this particular workshop, how better land use patterns could not only improve communities and save natural and agricultural land, but also protect water quality. And we decided to focus on 2040 to stay within the 20-year planning horizon that most communities follow here in Florida. Our project started with the recognition that Escambia and Santa Rosa counties will keep growing. Escambia will grow by 9% between now, or between actually the baseline of 2023 and 2040, and 22% by 2070. And this is according to the University of Florida's Bureau of Economic and Business Research, and this is their modest projection. So it is a pretty solid, widely accepted projection. Those Bieber projections are what most community planning departments in Florida use for their own planning purposes. Now, Santa Rosa County has a smaller population than Escambia County currently, but it's on an even faster growth trajectory, 24% by 2040 and 59%, almost 60% by 2070. And how the two counties plan for this growth and their commitment to those plans will determine, we are convinced, the health of their environment, the quality of life, and their economic prosperity. And a core element of their environmental health is their water quality. So, to account for the impact of projected population growth in the two counties, as well as the moderate projection from the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration's sea level rise projection, and both of these are, by the way, for 2040. We asked our partners at the University of Florida's Center for Landscape Conservation Planning to develop a couple of scenarios for future development in these two counties. The likelihood of development of land in the two counties is based on a series of factors, which you see in this slide on the left side, and you can see the relative weight that the Florida researchers gave to them. But they include factors like the proximity of the particular land to highways, to other development, to waterfront, because people tend to like to live near waterfront, whether wetlands are present, because it's harder and more expensive to develop land that has wetlands on it. And also soil quality is a factor in the likelihood of development. So we used two scenarios, and these are projections, not predictions, but projections that are based on a set of reasonable assumptions. On the left, the trend is if the two counties continue to develop at the current pace of development, if they stay on their current trajectory, we call this the trend or the status quo or the business as usual scenario. On the right is the 2040 alternative or conservation scenario, where if the counties will develop at a 30% higher density than they currently have been developing at and protect high priority conservation land. This is the different development pattern that we'll see by 2040. Now, under the trend, the one on the left, an additional 20,300 acres will need to be developed in the two counties to absorb the projected population growth that I showed you all in the previous slide. You know, the 9% in Escambia County and the 24% in Santa Rosa County. And the red areas on the map, which are the developed areas, spread farther from the urban core in that trend scenario. Under the alternative, almost 8,000 fewer acres would need to be developed. And that's basically 40% savings, 40% fewer acres developed, 40% more land preserved, and less leapfrog development to undeveloped areas. Now, what may seem like a relatively small difference in 2040 keeps expanding in future decades with the continuing population growth. It's kind of a snowball effect where the further you get, the greater the impact is. And by 2070, the difference in the loss of undeveloped land between the status quo scenario, the trend scenario, and the alternative or conservation scenario expands to about 19,000 acres. And it continues to grow from there, the difference. This slide maybe shows you a little bit better um, the difference in scenarios between the trend uh, or the difference in development between the trend scenario and the alternative scenario. In the trend, there is more development north of Pensacola and north and east of Milton than in the alternative. And remember, the population increase in both these scenarios is exactly the same. It's just a more efficient way, a more sustainable, more responsible way to develop in the alternative scenario. Now, we know that development consumes open land, but it also increases runoff of nitrogen and phosphorus, which is the raw material for harmful algal blooms for eutrophication in waterways. We know this happens because rain from rooftops and additional rooftops and pavement associated with development, especially sprawling development. If you hear a strange noise in the background, it's my dog, by the way. Sorry about that. He's not very respectful of my presentations. It's from rain from rooftops and pavements, more impervious surface that washes nutrient pollution from fertilizer, airborne fossil fuel deposits, sediments, leaves, and other organic debris straight into waterways or into stormwater facilities that can't handle it all. Whereas compact development reduces paved areas, reduces runoff and nutrient pollution, and also leaves more land to absorb and naturally purify stormwater. A 2006 study from the Environmental Protection Agency shows that spreading homes actually produces more runoff than clustering them. So dilution is not the solution when it comes to reducing stormwater runoff. Compact development, which you see in scenario C in this slide, more units per acre actually reduces runoff and reduces nutrient loading. So as part of our study, and this was the additional element that we added to this workshop that we hadn't in the prior workshops, the University of Florida Center for Coastal Solutions projected both stormwater runoff and the nutrient loading that would result from that in both the trend scenario and the conservation or alternative scenario. And what they found was 75% less runoff and a corresponding reduction in nutrient loading from nitrogen and phosphorus under the conservation scenario compared to the trend scenario. So extending the current pattern, maintaining the current development pattern, maintaining the current density will increase by 2040 annual stormwater runoff by the equivalent of 15,000 Olympic swimming pools. That's a lot more runoff. An Olympic swimming pool is somewhere around 500,000 gallons of water. It'll increase nitrogen runoff by 100,000 pounds a year and phosphorus runoff by 20,000 pounds. And remember, as I said, those nutrients are the fuel for harmful algal blooms, which we have experienced in waterways all over the state. It's one of the consequences of not planning properly for development. But developing at a 30% higher density will, and protecting high priority conservation land, like you saw in the conservation scenario, will benefit water quality. It'll reduce runoff by 75%. And the kiddie pool there obviously is exaggerating things just to make a point that it's a big, comparing that to the Olympic swimming pool, it's a big reduction in runoff. And it's also a big reduction in nitrogen and phosphorus in the nutrient loading. And this is where what may have looked like small differences in the land use maps start to look more significant. These results are consistent with a 2009 study that appeared in the Journal of the American Water Resources Association. And that study found that doubling of densities from 4 to 8 units per acre would reduce runoff more than traditional best practices for stormwater management. Again, it's the opposite of the notion that dilution is the solution to runoff and nutrient loading. It's in fact the exact opposite. Clustering higher densities is much better. And the higher density that I showed you was just 30% more, and yet there was still significant benefits of it. So 4 to 8 units per acre. Here's what 8 units per acre looks like. It's still a very reasonable density. We're not talking about high-rise apartment buildings here. There are economic reasons in addition to environmental reasons for reducing runoff and nutrient loading in this region, which ultimately ends up in the Pensacola and Perdido Bays. According to Florida State University Center for Economic Forecasting and Analysis study that they did for the Pensacola Perdido Bays Estuary Program, there is a $22.6 billion positive economic impact from the two bays. Just they're enormous economic as well as environmental assets in this region. That study found more than 100,000 direct and indirect jobs associated with the bays. Failing to protect the bays from increased runoff will, as I explained, make them more vulnerable to algal blooms. And all you need is a 1-point uptick in chlorophyll, which basically clouds the water, and that's associated with algal blooms. And it has an $89 million negative impact on real estate in the region. And algal blooms, of course, will also damage the commercial and recreational activities that are associated with the bays. Now, if you know these counties, you know that both of them are heavily forested. Almost half of Escambia County, almost 2/3 of Santa Rosa County. You can see that in the crosshatched sections in this map of the two counties. Um, and the importance of forests for water quality is that they are the most protective land use for water quality. They naturally purify water and they also reduce sediment in waterways by reducing erosion. Now, between them, these two counties also have nearly 200,000 acres in agriculture, which is important for the region's economy as well as for its environment. And agriculture as well as forests are at risk when development stretches beyond the urban cores in these two counties, because it's going to take out, most likely, it's going to take out forest or agricultural land. Now, there are many, many good reasons to protect natural and agricultural land. These are known as ecosystem services. Such land recharges the underground water supply. 90% of Floridians get their water from our aquifers. Um, as I mentioned, they naturally cleanse nutrients from stormwater runoff. They absorb stormwater and reduce flooding risk. They preserve wildlife habitat and biodiversity. They sequester carbon. They expand recreational opportunities for residents and visitors alike. That's important for our quality of life as Floridians. It's important for all the visitors that we attract from around the country and around the world for our outdoor recreation. People come from all over the world here to experience our outdoor recreation. So it's good for our economy. And it maintains agriculture and its economic and cultural benefits. Uh, the products that we grow, the jobs that they support, our food security, um, our agricultural heritage and way of life, and our communities who are built around agriculture. So it's important to our character as a state. And to give you an idea of the value of these ecosystem services, um, Everglades National Park's ecosystem services have been estimated at $50 billion a year. Now, there are additional benefits from compact development beyond environmental benefits, um, and which are saving land and improving water quality, as I've already explained. They also improve our quality of life. They create more opportunities for us to walk and bike, to work, to shopping, to medical appointments. Um, they're they're good for public health, for our exercise opportunities to exercise. They create the kind of density that makes public transit viable. Fewer car trips means less air and water pollution. They create more options, the density for workforce housing to work. Um, they provide public services more efficiently and cheaply for taxpayers. So good, as a point I've already made, good urban planning is not only good for the environment, but it's good for the business climate because it helps keep taxes down for families and for businesses. And this critical mass of residents associated with more compact development creates more vibrant communities that attracts more high-end employers, investment, and amenities. Now, at the estuary program's good suggestion, we convened an advisory group of local leaders and planners to invite ideas for how to realize more sustainable bay-friendly development in the two counties. how to get closer to that conservation scenario and away from the trend scenario. And we ended up dividing the suggestions that we got into short, medium, and long-term options, with short being things that could be done almost right away, medium more like a 5 year window, and long-term 10 years. So I'll start with the short-term options on this slide. Um, One is to review growth plans and land development regulations for their alignment on conservation, transportation, and land use objectives. What this is basically saying is plan regionally. It makes sense because the impacts of growth don't stop at jurisdictional boundaries. They spread across a region. And this kind of regional planning would actually be a lot easier in these two counties because they have fewer local governments. You can actually fit the people in a regional planning group around a conference table in these two counties. Escambia has just, in addition to the county, just two incorporated municipalities. Santa Rosa has only three. When you plan regionally, you avoid local governments working at cross purposes, and you also avoid what I call the race to the bottom when it comes to development, where local governments undercut each other in their development standards to try to attract developments and get, sort of that sugar rush associated with building a development. But what ends up being a long-term burden in terms of the infrastructure associated with it. So the next idea is to kind of similar, is to create an interagency working group on planning to preserve the bay watersheds. Now, there are multiple state and local agencies involved in protecting the bay watersheds who should be at the table for that. The State Department of Environmental Protection, the Northwest Florida Water Management District, the Department of Agriculture, the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, as well as county and city planning departments. This is one of my favorite, the next one. Establish and finance local land conservation programs. Just in the last two election cycles, 8 counties in Florida either established or extended local land conservation programs. That will help counties achieve one of the goals in the conservation scenario of protecting high priority conservation land. This election coming up next month, 4 more counties are going to be asking their voters to approve financing for local land conservation programs: Martin, Osceola, Clay, and Lake. History shows that there's high interest in land conservation in both Escambia and Santa Rosa counties. 10 years ago, when there was a state land conservation ballot amendment for the Florida Constitution, both counties voted over Santa Rosa County with 68%, and we're at 65%. Escambia County with 72% of folks voting in favor of land conservation. So there's a strong constituency for that. The advantage of doing this at the local level is you create a local funding source that can leverage that state money, can also leverage federal money and private money from groups like the Nature Conservancy. Establishing a land conservation program, if you're a local government, means you go near the head of the line when it comes to competing for funding from those matching sources. Failing to do so means you end up at the back of the line. Remember, the legislature has earmarked $2 billion in the last 3 years in funding to preserve the Florida Wildlife Corridor. That's that 18 million acre connected network of natural lands throughout Florida, 8 million acres of which are still unprotected. That's important for the survival of threatened or endangered species like the Florida panther, but it's also important for so many other things like protecting our water quality and even preserving those outdoor recreational opportunities that I've mentioned. And it happens that significant portions of Escambia and Santa Rosa counties uh, have or lie within the Florida Wildlife Corridor. Um, According to the University of Florida, Escambia has 158,700 acres in the Florida Wildlife Corridor, and 90% of that is unprotected, about 143,000 acres. Santa Rosa County has 388,900 acres in the Florida Wildlife Corridor, and about a third of that is unprotected. So 131,000 acres unprotected. That's all prime land that these local governments could interest the state in financing protection for. The last idea on this slide is to utilize offsite stormwater treatment. What that does is allows more compact development by utilizing more of a parcel for development, sending the stormwater to offsite places for treatment. And you can actually turn those offsite locations into local amenities like this photo that Christian took of Corinne Jones Community Park, which is a stormwater treatment area. Some more short-term options. Consider adaptation strategies and resilience in any land development regulation changes. This should be a no-brainer all over Florida. We've got to think, especially in the wake, this should all be fresh in everybody's mind in the wake of the hurricanes that we've had this year. A state-funded assessment of Pensacola's vulnerability to sea level rise showed that sea level is projected to rise 16 inches by 2040 in Pensacola, 38 inches by 2070, and 60 inches by the end of the century. That's 5 feet, which is going to make the area much more vulnerable to tidal flooding and flooding from rainfall. But there are going to be obvious impacts within Pensacola to land use, transportation, water and sewer systems as soon as 2040. You can go to the City of Pensacola's website for more details. The second idea is to promote infill without worsening stormwater problems. Reconsider in Pensacola a exemption for infill from stormwater management. I think you can do both. You can have infill development and still responsibly handle your stormwater so it doesn't create a problem in your neighborhood. And then another one I think is pretty obvious, to encourage walking and public health and all the benefits I mentioned in that previous slide, including enhancing public safety, require sidewalks in new developments. Now, some medium-term options. Amend the local comp plans and land development regulations to align with the estuary program's conservation and management plan. Their plan's overall goal is to improve sustainability and the health of the bay's watersheds, well, enhancing communities' quality of life and economic prosperity. And specific goals include strengthening community resilience, improving water quality, and restoring and conserving wildlife and critical habitat. Second idea is to adopt form-based codes in key commercial areas. Form-based codes are an alternative to traditional zoning, which dictates separate land uses. Form-based codes focus more on physical form and characteristics of buildings and public spaces, and they're more likely to encourage mixed-use development and pedestrian-friendly streets, which are a better fit for the kind of compact development I've been advocating in this presentation. Orange County, where I live, is about to switch to form-based codes in its next reboot of its county planning. And finally, on this slide, prioritize nature-based solutions for stormwater management and flood mitigation. This photo that Christian took shows a nature-based solution in the right-of-way there that is a way to absorb more stormwater. It's what we call green infrastructure, whereas traditional infrastructure, cement conduits, that's gray infrastructure. Green infrastructure is actually less expensive to build and maintain than gray infrastructure. It's also things like street trees to absorb and purify stormwater runoff as well as the air. And this also means preserving coastal marshes and wetlands to absorb stormwater and reduce storm surge and erosion. A 2007 EPA report found that this green infrastructure, this nature-based solutions, actually saves 80% over conventional infrastructure, over that gray, what I'm calling gray infrastructure. Few more medium-term options. Accessory dwelling units. These are also known as mother-in-law suites or granny flats. They allow increased density and more infill development opportunities by allowing these ADUs on property, on residential property. They allow more people per lot and more density to support transit and attract business and retailers and expand walking opportunities. It's a way to expand affordable housing without disrupting neighborhood character. Another idea is to reduce or eliminate parking requirements. That increases the amount of land available for compact infill development and also reduces stormwater runoff. Offering density bonuses for developers as an incentive for urban infill or redevelopment. Requiring connected street networks in new developments. If you look at the graphic on this slide, the traditional grid, what was common in this country before World War II was a lot more friendly for walking. It was much less prone to traffic problems. And that was back when we designed neighborhoods for walking for people, instead of designing them, as you see in the lower left-hand corner, for cars. And in that lower left-hand corner design means that if you want to go anywhere, you got to get in your car, which has all kinds of consequences for uh, air and water, and it's a negative impact on certainly on walkability and public safety. And finally, the last option here, a long-term option, would be to establish a urban growth boundary for the Pensacola metro area. It would direct growth to urban areas or this urban area with the services in place to accommodate it, and would make it harder for development to leapfrog into rural areas. This may seem it's a longer term option. This may seem like a hard sell, but there are actually 28 of Florida's 67 counties which have some sort of urban development boundary or urban service district to try to direct development toward urban areas and away from rural areas. So that is my presentation. I'm happy if anybody has any questions to do my best at responding.
So yeah, feel free to put your questions in the chat, and I've got a few already ready for Paul to kind of get things started. And one of them, just since you ended with the piece about urban growth boundaries, Paul, and I didn't realize there were so many in Florida or some form of urban growth boundary. And I think one question for you would be, what are the different ways the communities handle that? Do some of them do that through zoning? So they draw a line and say outside of this area, we're going to keep it rural and agricultural, and you basically can't build out there. Or I know some communities, I don't know about in Florida, but we'll still say you can build out there, but the taxpayers won't pay for your infrastructure, for example. So there's a fiscal tool, that's held in check to restrain that. So what are some of the ways that the communities in Florida deal with that?
Yeah, this is generally part of their comprehensive plans, and they set a higher bar for development approvals outside of the um, urban development boundary or the urban services district. Um, they need to, because it's part of their comprehensive plans, they need to amend their comprehensive plans. And there are some counties that, and this is something we advocate, that actually require um, a supermajority from their county commissioners to approve that kind of comprehensive plan amendment that allows development outside of the urban service district or the urban growth boundary. In Miami, which was what I pictured on that last slide, if you want to do something outside the urban growth boundary, they have 13, because they're Florida's most populous county, they have 13 county commissioners, and you have to get 9 of 13 votes to develop outside the urban growth boundary in Miami-Dade County. Now, in Martin County, they have an urban services district. They have several urban services districts, and there you need to amend the comprehensive plan, and you only need a majority. You need 3 of 5 commissioners there, but it's a lot harder than a simple zoning change. There's a higher bar there, and that's generally the way other counties handle it.
Yeah, we don't have any boundaries like that here in Northwest Florida that I'm aware of. There's some limited amount of, I think, language toward that end. I think in Escambia County's comprehensive plan or LDC, and then in Santa Rosa, I know that at least informally, the planning staff has told me there that in the past, the commissioners, just as sort of a rule of thumb, generally didn't approve rezonings north of, and I don't remember if somebody in Santa Rosa may be able to tell me, one of the east-west roads north of Milton there, and I don't remember which one it was. They generally tried to hold that line, but in recent years, that that does not happen anymore, and they've approved rezonings north of that line, and that's spreading kind of development. So, um, what are
And I was just going to say that the difference between the land development regulation and the comprehensive plan is sort of like the difference between the law and the Constitution. And the more that you can get in your comprehensive plan to promote sustainable development, the more likely it is to stick than a land development regulation change.
So you work with communities and your organization does all around Florida. And one of the things I'm curious about, and you mentioned some in your presentation earlier, so many different stresses that are put on communities as they grow rapidly and they grow poorly in that sprawling way. And those are fiscal issues, and there are environmental and water issues. The ability to provide services in these areas. I'm wondering if you have noticed any specific themes that seem to concern people the most or that drive people the most to action in terms of their concerns around Florida? Is it one or two particular things like, say, traffic congestion that gets them the most upset and engaged, or is it really just depend on where you are?
I think consistently what people are most concerned about, what I hear the most complaints about, is traffic congestion, number one, and water quality problems. I think there is, and it's interesting, these land conservation amendments, which or these local land conservation programs, if they get on the ballot, they generally pass. And the way that they are sold is as a means of protecting waterways and the drinking water supply. So I think consistently people are concerned with traffic and water quality because those will degrade your quality of life just about faster than any of the other consequences. I don't think people. I certainly don't like. I don't think people like paying higher taxes, but it's harder to convince people that they're going to pay higher taxes if they don't do a better job of planning for growth. But that's exactly what's going to happen.
Just as an add-on to that previous issue about rezonings, and I didn't mention earlier, but we are honored to have Commissioner Kerry Smith of Santa Rosa County is joining us here this evening, and he did message me that it's 182 is the name of the east-west road in Santa Rosa County, and he reminded me that the county commission, since he's been on the past few years, they have held that line on additional rezonings for the past few years in that area. So thank you, Commissioner Smith, for reminding us of that. And since I'm talking about elected officials and candidates for, we do have Kim Klein's joining us here this evening as well, who's running for office. And Kim is running for State House District 2. Is that, am I remembering that right, Kim? Yes, just give me a thumbs up. Is that right? State House District 2?
Yep, State
Okay,
House District 2.
Very good. Thank you. And we're so glad you could be here to join us. So thank you. Paul, what can you name some communities in Florida that have done a good job implementing some of the things that the local committee recommended at the end there, some of the short term and medium term and long term? Are there a few exemplary communities that have really done a good job of implementing some of those things?
Well, where I live, the neighboring town, Winter Park, has passed some amendments to their charter to specifically protect some of their public land, their conservation land, to require a supermajority to do anything to develop land like that, which is a good added layer of protection for that. Seminole County has what they call their rural boundary, which is the eastern third of the county, which is basically designated for open land, agricultural land, smaller rural communities. So those are two examples close to me here. Martin County has a long tradition of trying to maintain its growth within its urban services district. Now, there's been some controversy in recent years about development proposals outside the urban services district that have been approved. But as a consequence, one of the commissioners who had been on the commission since 2004 just got voted out. So um, I think there is still a strong tradition in Martin County. And for the most part, they've done a pretty good job. Martin County, if you drive up, if you're in Southeast Florida and you drive um, from Broward County through Palm Beach County into Martin County, you will be struck by the difference when you cross the border into Martin County. Martin County has been a lot more stringent about some reasonable limits on development. Um, and none of it's important for me to make the point that none of what I'm advocating or none of the suggestions that were made by the advisory group are calling for any sort of moratorium on growth or stopping growth. They are talking about doing a better job for planning for growth. I don't think, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you think, we're not in a position in Florida to stop growth, but we're in a good position to turn growth into an asset if we direct it to existing communities. Like I said, it becomes an asset. It creates more vibrant communities. It supports public transit. It creates more options for affordable housing. I've been working with some folks in the city of Lake Wales and that's in Polk County, and it's on the Lake Wales Ridge. Um, and they are smart enough to recognize that in coming decades, there's going to be a big influx of people moving away from coastal areas as they become increasingly vulnerable to storms and sea level rise. They're going to be moving toward the middle of Florida. So they want to get ready for that in Lake Wales. And Lake Wales has adopted a plan that includes a lot of these standards for new development, like have been suggested. Traditional neighborhood developments that include things like sidewalks, that include traditional, pre-World War II grids for traffic. They're a real model community right now for adopting a plan like that.
So we want to try to wrap up in the next minute or two here, just to keep us to about 1 hour. But I did want to ask you, Paul, as we finish up. Um, well, I know. Well, first of all, is this information all available on your website? Isn't there a web page dedicated to this particular project in Escambia and Santa Rosa counties?
Yes, if you go to our 1000fof.org and you look at the top menu that says 2040, 2070 project, I believe that's how it's labeled. You do the pull down menu and you can find Escambia, Santa Rosa.
Okay. And I'll send that out to everybody again and just a follow-up email after the event. And then I guess the last thing would be kind of a two-part question. As we work toward trying to implement these better land use policies and the types of communities you've talked about that your study found were going to help preserve water quality and protect open space and rural lands, I guess what concerns you the most about our ability to get to that place and to implement these types of things? And then what are some things there, or one thing maybe that gives you hope toward that?
Yeah. Um, I am concerned about the legislature intervening and perhaps tying the hands of local governments that decide they may want to put some sort of reasonable controls on growth, how growth is planned. Um, so, but I think so I'm concerned about that, but I think I am aware of a groundswell in Florida of public opinion that is moving toward. I think the pendulum is swinging back toward taking a better approach, a more sustainable approach to development. We saw it in some. Now we are strictly nonpartisan. We don't get involved in partisan elections, but we saw in some election results around the state in areas that have not done a great job of coping with development pressure that there are some candidates who are advocating um, taking a better look at that, who seem to have replaced some of the folks who weren't being such good stewards.
Wonderful. Well, I think with that, we will bid farewell. I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. All of you who joined us are just by virtue of being here and learning more and getting engaged. You're certainly leaders in your community for doing that. So I applaud all of you for doing that, and especially thanks to those who are either in office now or running for office. That's a big deal, and so we appreciate you all joining us and learning more about these issues. And once again, thank you, Paul Owens, president of 1,000 Friends of Florida. I will follow up, as I said, again with everybody with a link to the Escamia Santa Rosa Project webpage on the Thousand Friends site. And then also we'll get this video. We've recorded this evening and we'll get it posted to YouTube. So if you want to watch a piece of it again or share it around. And with that, thanks again, everybody. And you all have a lovely evening.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Bye.